Thank you for providing me with time to comment today. I would like to begin by sharing my background in assistive technology used by people with disabilities and how that plays out in the educational realm. I share this personal perspective as one of many people tasked with the day-to-day work involved in making life more accessible for our fellow citizens with disabilities. In 1996, I was about to graduate with a master's degree in whole systems design with the student loan payments that I'd soon need to start repaying. I answered a job ad for a position with a small assistive technology consulting firm in Seattle's University District. They were looking for someone with skills in fabrication as well as capability with computers. The owner figured that if the applicant was already capable in fabrication skills, then he could teach them the other required skills involved in implementing assistive technology solutions for his clients, which included those working with the Washington Department of Vocational Rehabilitation, DVR, those being served by the Veterans Administration, and some private pay clients. I had worked for several years as a musical instrument maker, working with tolerances measured in the thousandths of an inch, using a variety of tools and techniques, so I met the fabrication criteria, and I'd been using a computer in my pursuit of a graduate degree. The other criteria met for candidacy for this entry-level assistive technology position. Many of those being served by DVR were adults who worked for years bringing their unique skills to play as tax-paying mothers, fathers, sisters, or brothers. And then, one workplace injury or driving accident later, they might now be an electrician with a high-level spinal cord injury, but otherwise still knowledgeable about their trade, hoping to get back to work, to not be dependent upon a future of government handouts and charity. This client will be set up with a working space that could be accessed and used by a wheelchair user, where a standard keyboard and mouse may have previously been used for administrative tasks when not out in the field doing electrical installations prior to injury. A specialized keyboard and mouse would now take their place, and the electrician would now carry on the role of doing estimates and planning for another electrical contractor, perhaps also using speech recognition software for much of the time-consuming parts of that process. Where I had initially been called upon to fabricate various custom devices for clients as a primary focus of my work, trends moved more and more towards computer-based solutions to serve their needs. Assistive technology specialists with college-bound students with disabilities. While attending a computer fair at the University of Washington in 1998, I found out about the newly created Disabilities Opportunities Internetworking and Technology Do-It Scholars Program. It was spawned from a national version with the same goals of increasing opportunities for students with disabilities in science, technology, engineering, and math, STEM. The National Science Foundation provided early seed money, and once it was proven a successful idea, NSF told the founder to go and find funding to replicate the program at a local, sustainable level. College-capable high school students with a variety of disabilities would apply each winter, and then I'd reach out to those accepted to take part. In telephone interviews with the students, their parents, and sometimes their teachers, I'd compile a list of currently used hardware and software, and often suggest new tools that they were unaware of but could be of great use in their academic pursuits. The students would be provided long-term loans of a computer and the needed software and peripherals, insured by our program and serviced by me. I deliver this gear to their homes in late spring and show them how to use those elements of the system that were new to them. These students would then come each summer to the University of Washington to have an immersive college experience, living in dormitories, taking in lectures, and doing work in a computer lab as well as in labs of varying disciplines. The students would also learn about self-advocacy and about the differences between accommodations in K-12 education versus those in higher education. Examples of some assistive technology used by these scholars includes, for those with mobility impairments, we might have them use different keyboard types, some with key guards to prevent errant keystrokes, or one-hand layouts, with the keys rearranged from the common QWERTY layout so that the most commonly used keys were right below their dominant, functional, or sole hand. Trackballs, external touchpads, or eye tracking gear might be used when students were not able to use the standard computer mouse. Some might use a sip and puff switch for all computer control. Picture someone like Stephen Hawking and the assistive technology he used in his later years. Sucking in on a straw-like element would activate switch A, blowing into the straw component would activate switch B. This could then generate Morse code or control on-screen row column scanning software where the user would watch as the program moved through portions of a virtual keyboard until they triggered the switch to make their choice. This and other types of keyboard emulation provided access to those who were greatly restricted in both gross and fine motor function. The alternate mouse and keyboard solutions fall into the category referred to as mouse and keyboard emulation, and as far as the computer goes, it thinks it's taking in commands from a regular keyboard or mouse. Speech recognition software for both dictation and control the operating system. Students with dyslexia might be provided with a flatbed scanner coupled with scan-read software that could use optical character recognition to compensate for their difficulty with reading print or digital text. Then using text-to-speech technology to read aloud to them. And where they might thrive in audio processing, they might also make use of speech input via speech recognition software. Input and output information flows, both assisted by technology, letting them to take in information and demonstrate their capabilities. Students with low vision would be provided with magnification software, sometimes coupled with text-to-speech software, as is often difficult or impossible to read text if the magnification level leads to one or two characters filling the entire computer screen. It's better to have a computer read aloud rather than attempt that hyper-zoomed in manual reading. Students who are blind would be provided with screen reading software that provides either a text-to-speech output or refreshable braille output if hearing was also an issue. These students might be provided with scan read software specialized for blind and low vision users. Braille embossers would also be provided to those who were skilled in Braille, as well as software that would translate from standard digital text formats. A number of other disability types represented in the makeup of the yearly cohort might not need assistive technology solution, be those on the autistic spectrum or those using a manual wheelchair with otherwise full capability with their hands, vision, and cognition. For 22 years, I worked with these students following their stories as they attended colleges and universities, then went on to work for companies large and small, many exceeding the expectations of those who knew them only a few years earlier as high school students. Making the academic world accessible is essential to their later success in life. The educational systems where scholars would apply this assistive technology. For the most part, I'd facilitate these students being set up with the best of assistive technology that was available at the time, but I had little awareness of the educational systems in which they would then try to use that gear, be it in high school or in higher education. Having moved to Kitsap County in 2016, a ferry ride across Puget Sound from Seattle metro area, my commute rose from 15 minutes each direction to a 4-hour round trip, and I applied for a newly created position at Olympic College, IT Accessibility Coordinator. The college is one of 34 community and technical colleges in the state of Washington. These 34 colleges, as well as a number of public universities, were spurred on to greater efforts regarding accessibility with the implementation of what was then called Policy 188, brought forth from the Washington State Office of the Chief Information Officer. It laid out expectations for digital accessibility for state agencies, including those in higher education. Policy 188 has now been replaced with what is called User 01, which has been updated and refined and has expectations of compliance with the latest WCAG 2.2 AA standard by later this year. With Policy 188, each college or university needed to assign a person with duty of oversight and accessibility, and then the day-to-day work towards these goals would be carried out by teams, including someone with a title like mine, IT Accessibility Coordinator. Our primary focus in higher education is upon the various steps students will take to apply for entry, sign up for housing, enroll in classes, apply for financial aid, take classes, and do campus-related extracurricular activities, and finally graduate and enter the workforce. The technology and academic content those students encounter along the pathway. Only a few years ago, much of the digital systems students would have to interact with, be they assistive technology using students or not, would be applications created internally and continually improved upon by the college or university developers. In my 27 years of technology in higher education, I've seen much of what was fully created and controlled by college or university replaced by third-party tools, many in the form of web-based applications. Our colleges and universities are legally obligated by a number of state and federal regulations to provide an accessible technical as well as physical environment, a level playing field for our students. The student making use of a wheelchair to go from dorm room to cafeteria to class needs to be able to traverse that path without barriers. And the student using assistive technology, perhaps using screen reading software because they are blind, needs to be able to apply to college, apply for financial aid and scholarships, enroll in classes, and interact with accessible course content along with their student peers. This is made more and more difficult if third-party vendors providing this wide range of tools have not done the necessary work of making their offerings accessible. A major portion of my day-to-day work is an attempt to produce the most accessible of these from among the competition in this marketplace. The steps to acquire accessible information and communication technology. When someone on campus requests a new technology purchase, we in information technology must vet it for both security and accessibility. For the accessibility check, this often starts with a request for an accessibility conformance report, an ACR, which is the completed version from what is commonly called a voluntary product accessibility template, a VPAT, which outlines the tools used to evaluate and the results upon testing against each success criteria from the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG, currently at version 2.2, while most of us are now striving for compliance with WCAG 2.1 AA. The majority of ACRs that I get are poorly created and often plainly works of fiction, where an entire column that should indicate known problems and limitations for users of assistive technology instead merely shows the words supports again and again. So in the end, I need to do manual testing and verify just how accessible these applications are using both automated and manual techniques. As you can probably imagine, those wishing to buy these new tools are often having an initial contact with a salesperson at a third-party firm, and most of the time these salespeople have little or no knowledge about accessibility as it applies to the digital world faced by millions of assistive technology users. In addition to requests for new technology, I'm also tasked with examining those technologies which we already have and are actively using in our system. Anecdotally, from recent conversations with a few peers doing the same kind of work that I'm doing, each must at some point assess the accessibility of nearly 1,000 web applications being used at their particular college or university. Often the expectation is this will be done by one or two individuals. This workload could be made so much easier if third-party vendors had some legal, financial skin in the game, where upon failing to make accessible technology, they too could be fined and punished for failing to meet existing accessibility regulations. Unfortunately, only the higher education institution who buys their products is currently under such responsibility, and this is something that has likely not been part of the comments made to OIRA so far. As an individual commenting to you all, I do not seek relief from making the world more accessible, but would like to see the responsibility of that effort shared among all, including these third-party vendors. When consumers buy an automobile, it has already gone through crash tests with results available to all to make informed purchase decisions. Likewise for the surge protector you buy at the hardware store with an Underwriter's Lab approval label affixed to it. No such independent testing service does this work on behalf of higher education consumers to validate conformance to accessibility standards. Proactive efforts for instructional content. Just as we're challenged in procuring third-party web applications like course catalogs, scholarships, and sporting event web applications, we're also at a disadvantage when attempting to purchase digital versions of textbooks or online instructional courseware. Again, those firms have no legal skin in the game if their offerings sold to a college are not accessible. Where we are able to improve upon accessibility for instructional content is when instructors create the materials themselves and use best accessibility authoring practices for heading structure, alternative text for images, and all the usual so-called low-hanging fruit techniques for making content accessible. Then those instructors are able to create fully accessible content, adding it to their institution's learning management system. During the public comment period, before ADA Title II was released as a rule in 2024, there was the possibility of having a 5-day turnaround time to reactively make content accessible for a student. In very few cases would that be a reasonable amount of time to do such work, as has been my experience and the experience of others I know in higher education accessibility work. It usually takes a lot of work to remediate something that has not been created with accessibility in mind from the outset. ADA Title II calls for making all instructional content accessible, which is an ideal long-range solution to best serve the needs of students with disabilities. Just like their peers, they should be able to change their minds and take a different section of the same topic, which is likely to have a different textbook and a different set of content in the learning management system used by college or university. These students also deserve to change their minds and take a different class altogether, just as their fellow students at the institution may do. Accessibility delayed is accessibility denied in the present time for those students who rely upon it. We shouldn't make a wheelchair user wait outside of a building, even if only for a few minutes, while someone goes and fetches a temporary ramp to grant entry to the building. And we shouldn't tell the student to come back next quarter when we finally have the instructional materials in an accessible format for them to proceed with their studies. Students who are blind often get told not to pursue a particular academic discipline altogether. Like a brilliant friend of mine who has achieved a double major in math and foreign language. Just because the sighted instructor cannot imagine how a blind student could interact with math equation using a screen reader, that should not limit the student's pursuit of their academic topic of interest. The student with a high IQ masked by a learning disability should be allowed to flourish using assistive technology that provides equal but alternative inputs and outputs in processing information. Those on the spectrum might not benefit the same way as others using assistive technology, but combinations of physical space and technology setups may create the ideal conditions for them to thrive in academic space. Over a third of the cattle handling facilities in the United States have benefited from the unique design perspective of Temple Grandin brought to the industry. Being on the autistic spectrum presented her and the nation with a different way of looking at a problem and reaching a solution. We don't need to keep using portable document files, and it would be economically wise to instead use HTML or text files. It has been argued by some who have presented their views to you all that they will need more time and money in order to make PDF files accessible. Both municipalities and institutions of higher education are burdened with a legacy of having content output into PDF format. It was not originally developed as a technology with accessibility in mind. We should all move away from using PDFs in the future in favor of file formats like HTML or Microsoft Word docs. To be accessible, a PDF file needs to have accessibility tags, unseen by the average user but essential to interacting with these documents with assistive technology like screen reading software the blind rely upon. And in an attempt to preserve the appearance of the PDF, some people lock down elements of the file type, rendering it completely inaccessible to those who are blind, while sighted users can easily view the document. The best practice for PDFs is to create an accessible source document in a program like Microsoft Word or Adobe InDesign, and then have much of that structure transfer over into the PDF. Even having thoughtfully done that, one often needs to make a few more adjustments to have a fully accessible PDF at the end, with an expensive subscription to Adobe Acrobat Pro and often even more expensive PDF remediation tools that cost up to $1,000 per year. And if someone wants to make even a minor edit to the PDF, it can be a time-consuming, cumbersome process to then make it accessible again. In contrast to the PDF file, making a few tweaks to an HTML file or a Word document is so much more efficient and amenable to providing accessible content to users of assistive technology. The same Word document could have the date changed, swap out the presenter for an event, and then shared out again in just a matter of minutes. And while Microsoft Word is not free, all the major browsers that read HTML files are available to all free of charge. Thoughts regarding documents submitted by others to you all at OIRA. Some have argued that the web archive element of the ADA Title II is problematic, while I see it instead as a relief offered for those of us in the field of accessibility. Rather than go through years of old files still on our websites and remediate them, we can set those in a designated archive area clearly labeled as such. Only when a file is still actively being used would it not be eligible for transfer into an archive zone and hence not need remediation. As I understand it, if older content comment was requested, for example, for research purposes, a person with a disability could request accessible versions of those files. Meeting agendas from 10 years ago, in most cases, no longer of use to a municipality's users, but a researcher who uses assistive technology might request accessible versions of those to help her determine when the City Council first began discussions about acquisitions of a park, now owned by the city for 10 years. This archive requirement should be left intact, especially as many have done the proactive work of moving digital assets to such website structures. There have been many years to make municipal and educational websites accessible, and the obligations to do so have been in place for quite some time. Both the documents submitted by Public Powered Policy, Rebecca B. Bond, and Kristen Stitcher, as well as the one National Federation for the Blind submitted, clearly lay out this in more eloquent terms than I could attempt to do. As the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network commented in their written submission, a change in the regulation should not be an interim final rule. Interim final rules should only be promulgated if they relate to routine or uncontroversial matters, and the department would have to make available a period for comments and rescind the regulation if they receive a substantive amount of negative comments. Those requesting exemptions from compliance for populations of, say, 10,000 or less are plainly ignoring that people with disabilities live in large cities and these small towns, and their needs are important regardless of where they live in the United States. Those arguing that PDF remediation is expensive and complex have my understanding as someone who has remediated way too many of them, and the simple suggestion I have for them is to move away from that expensive and problematic file format and instead use HTML or other file types more easily made accessible. I suspect that those requesting a delay of 1 or 2 more years will not, in those 2 years into the future, be able to show that they put in a good faith effort to comply with the ADA Title II, and will instead be asking for yet another extension, kicking the can down the road while the lives of people with disabilities are put on hold or severely degraded as it comes to access. The American Federation for the Blind said it well within their submitted comment that issuing an interim final rule that pushes back the timeline, expands the exceptions, or further exempts certain entities just makes it harder for 45 million Americans to participate in public life. Like the National Federation for the Blind, I too, using their words, oppose any attempts to delay, rescind, or otherwise undermine the effectiveness of the Americans with Disabilities Act Title II website regulation that is set to take effect on April 24th, 2026. In conclusion, I submit these comments today as an individual who works in higher education accessibility efforts. I'm not seeking a change in the implementation of ADA Title II just to make my workload a bit easier. That would ignore the needs of so many of my fellow Americans with disabilities who need barriers removed for their full participation in educational and civic life. Thank you.